Hello students, and welcome to the third session, the third edition of our webinar series for professional development. This is our resource support webinar version 3. And in this session, we're going to be taking you through the very last two learning activities for this subject. So we're going to be looking at 360-degree feedback and also the learning activity on professional growth. So this is the third installment of the 4 webinars for this particular unit or this particular subject, professional development. This is the final webinar for resource support. So what we mean by that is this is the last webinar that we're just going to be talking about content and ideas. The final webinar next week will be what we call our assessment support workshop. And I'll actually be taking you each through those 3 assessments that you see on your screen now. Just explaining exactly what you need to submit, what the requirements of that assessment are, and what I'm looking out for when I'm assessing and grading your work. So in tonight's session, we'll be talking our way through 360-degree feedback, mechanisms, different feedback, types of feedback. We'll also be looking specifically at 360-degree feedback. It's something that we need to talk about particularly. But also we'll be talking about things like networking and creating a competitive advantage. This is a great webinar to have as a real conversational webinar. It's really difficult to find the times that are suiting of this particular group. So unfortunately, I'm the only one at the moment in this room, so it might be a short webinar tonight. It's very difficult to be conversational with just one person. So I'll do my absolute best to present this in the best way I can. In future, guys, I really need you to be a part of these webinar series to make it a little bit more interactive just going forward. Okay, so let's have a bit of a recap on what we did last week. So I should say by the end of this session tonight, you'll actually have all of the information that you need to successfully complete the following learning activities: 360-degree feedback and professional growth. Indeed, you have all of the information now by the end of this session to complete all of the learning activities, the 5 learning activities that you'll find in this subject in this unit. Okay, so just a bit of a recap on last week. What did we talk about? Well, last week we talked a little bit about understanding self. So we titled the webinar all about understanding self. And we looked at things like learning and learning styles and how that all works, strengths and weaknesses, how to prioritize your time a little bit better. We talked about learning, actually what learning is, the stages that one goes through with learning, and things like that, understanding your own working patterns and all of that sort of jazz. I guess just as a holistic sort of look at it, the reason why we look or why we bother trying to understand ourselves as leaders, as managers, but as leaders in our field, it's really important to have self-awareness. So there is a topic called emotional intelligence, and the idea of emotional intelligence is really the ability to recognize one's own and other people's emotions, and essentially to be able to influence other people as a result. So that's where we're leading. Where we're leading with all of this is the ability to be able to influence other people. And so where emotional intelligence sits in is you must first be able to be self-aware. To be able to be aware of others and then to ultimately be able to relationship manage other people, i.e. to inspire them, to develop them, to ultimately influence their behavior. We must be able to be aware of other people, but before we can be aware of other people, so before we can empathize and understand others, we absolutely have to be able to understand ourselves. So we must have emotional awareness. We must be able to understand how to self-assess ourselves. And we also have to be able to start the process of self-management. So understanding how to, control one's emotions, be a bit transparent with how things are. From there, you can actually then begin to relationship manage or probably initially be aware of others and then be able to relationship manage. So do all the things like developing and influencing and inspiring. That's the ultimate goal here in leadership, is to motivate, to inspire, and ultimately to influence others, to mobilize energy out of other people, which is what we talk about all the time throughout this course. So that's what we talked about last week. And it is important to understand that that's how it all sort of comes together. So in the grand scheme of things, the reason why we talk about learning styles and getting to know yourself a little bit better, understanding your own strengths and weaknesses, there's a word I use a little bit, just, your own routines, understanding your own routines. It's really important to understand yourself so that you have the ability to be able to control and regulate your own emotion. But ultimately where we're going with that is the ability to regulate, inspire, motivate, and relationship manage others. So that's the background behind that. Now, tonight's session, I think what we might do is just get straight into it. I'm going to actually open up each of those learning activities that are on the screen. And I'm actually just going to be talking through each of the questions. And at each question, there'll be a great opportunity to have a bit of a chat about each of those areas. So without further ado, I'll jump into the first one, which we'll be looking at the activity on 360-degree feedback. Okay, so you've got 5 questions in this set. Now remember, guys, when it comes to the learning activities, you have unlimited attempts. So please do not ever hesitate to make a mistake or anything like that at all. This is effectively the best way to explain this is that what we're doing now is this is the in-class stuff. So these questions, this is all about being in class. This is all about asking questions from a trainer, asking questions of the student, but the student also being yourselves, engaging in the material in class. The assessments is where it all comes together for you. That's where we're effectively testing or double checking your understanding and getting you to demonstrate understanding. These activities, the idea behind them is if you have completed all of these activities, you will have all of the information that you need to then successfully go off and do your assessment tasks. So it gives you a chance to practice in a really comfortable way where there's unlimited attempts. And even when it comes to the actual assessments, you technically have up to 3 attempts on those. If by the time you get to your second attempt, and I'm seeing that you're needing a little bit more help, I'll be there to give you a bit of a guiding help in any case. So certainly don't worry about that sort of a thing in any case. Alrighty, so the first subject, or the first activity, 360-degree feedback. I guess the topic that we're looking at here is really feedback, and it rolls onto professional development, which there's a great link between the two. But actually, straight out of the materials, the learning materials on this one, and if you do need to know where the learning materials, I'll take you back to that. If you go to the home page, there's 2 places. You can actually click on the image. So if I right click and open that, you'll see that opens up the learning materials. Also right here, the lessons. That's where you actually can access your learning materials from as well. So you've got both of those places, which will take you to the same spot. And so yeah, we expect that you guys have a bit of a look through the actual learning materials to aid and guide you through these questions, along with having conversations with myself and checking in obviously with these webinars. So let's start with feedback. Actually, as I say, straight out of the materials, the power of feedback. This is actually taken straight out of the learning materials. Feedback is a key component to advance you in your career. Feedback can be offered in many forms, whether it is a structured feedback session or a casual feedback on the run. A great strategy for professional growth is the ability to frequently ask for feedback from others. Feedback provides you with important information about your behavior or your actions. Based on the feedback that you receive, you can actually adjust your current and future behavior so that your desired results are achieved. So that's just the definition or the power of feedback, or the definition straight off the learning materials. First question that you see there in this activity is, what is the frequency of the feedback that you currently receive, and how can you improve the frequency and quality of the feedback? What we're actually asking you there is just to tell us how often do you receive feedback, and essentially what you can do to improve the frequency, so how often, and the quality of the feedback that you get. So if the feedback that you were receiving from either a team leader or a boss or something was pretty weak, or it wasn't if you would ask how your performance was and all you got was, yep, that's good, or yep, okay, what could you do to get a little bit more quality, a little bit more information than just, yep, okay, or something like that? So that's sort of what we're asking you. So how often do you receive feedback, and what you can do to actually increase or improve the amount of times that you receive feedback, and then improve the quality of the feedback that you receive. I actually want to talk about 360-degree feedback because that's really what this subject is all about. And 360-degree feedback, funnily enough, it's actually not explained, in my opinion, very, very well in the learning materials. And it's something that you guys need to know, because in your first assessment task, you're going to be asked how to use this particular tool, 360-degree feedback, when you might use it, why you might use it, and the benefits of it, and so forth. So it's really important that we talk through it today. 360-degree feedback is 360 degrees. So a circle is 360 degrees. There's 360 degrees in a circle. It's feedback from all angles. That's the way I would look at it as. So it's feedback right across all angles of the circle. So if you look all the way around you in a circle, it's feedback from all areas. That might be another way to look at it. There's two words that come up for me when I'm trying to explain what 360-degree feedback is. And the two words that always come up, one is anonymous, and the second word is confidential. So the word anonymous and the word confidential are pretty similar. They're pretty close. But what we mean by anonymous is that it's the feedback that we receive. So if I'm receiving 360-degree feedback, so if I'm receiving feedback from all angles, i.e. from all my direct reports, from everybody that I engage with at work, that's what we mean by 360 degrees. That's what we mean by all angles. If I'm receiving feedback from all of those that are in my working circle, so to speak, the first word that comes up is the word anonymous. Being anonymous, I am not to know who said what. So the first key consideration 360-degree feedback is it must be anonymous. You are not to know who gave you that feedback. Second word, confidential. What I mean by that is that that's my information only. So when I receive that anonymous feedback from 360 degrees from my full working circle, when I receive that anonymous feedback, it is for my eyes only. It is not for anybody else to see. It is completely confidential. So that's what we mean by anonymous and confidential. It's quite interesting because typically organizations have a habit of using this tool, but completely in the wrong way. For example, using a 360-degree feedback for a performance appraisal. So a performance appraisal is like a formalized performance meeting where you're sitting down and you're having a chat about your performance. Some companies do it as every 6 months. Some companies do a annual performance appraisal. It's not a good idea. It is difficult to properly structure a 360-degree feedback process that creates an atmosphere of trust when you use 360 evaluations to measure performance. Okay, so this is also what I want to talk about as well. I guess the point of a 360 feedback is, look, they are very, very personal things. They are actually not there to measure performance. Believe it or not, the 360-degree feedback is there to look at all of the personal stuff, which can be a very, 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 very dangerous thing if not used correctly. If it is not anonymous, you open the door for having problems between those two people, the one that's providing the feedback as well as the one that's receiving it, because now they know exactly how the other one feels about them. It's a problem. We don't want that at all. Okay, so a 360-degree feedback should be measuring things like behaviors. It should be measuring things like how well you interact with others, what sort of a team player you are. It should be measuring things like your leadership skill, your ability to motivate or energize others around you. It should measure some of the items in your character, how well people get along with you, those sorts of things. It's interesting, but what it should not do in any way, shape, or form is measure performance. It is not there as a performance measurement tool. It's not there to measure how many orders you picked, packed, and shipped that day. It is not there to measure how well you are at turning up to work on time. It is not there to measure and compare you up against your KPIs or your key performance indicators. It is purely there as a behavioural appraisal from those in and around you, and it is designed to be used as a leadership tool to improve your skill, to improve your ability to work with other people. So a 360-degree feedback tool as a development tool should help employees to recognise their own strengths and weaknesses. And so when done properly, 360 is a very effective development tool for that reason. As I mentioned before, if it's used as a performance appraisal tool, it's a big problem because the 360-degree feedback should be focusing on behaviours, not on the skills and the job requirements or the performance objectives at all. So those sort of things will be appraised through the normal methods, through the normal ways with your manager. Very dangerous to do a 360-degree feedback in relation to performance. That's not what it's there for. Okay, so that's 360-degree feedback. Have a look online if you're interested in seeing a little bit more. That there are some templates online. You can get a bit of information. You can see what it might sort of look like. But that's, in a nutshell, what 360-degree feedback is. Just to wrap it up, key with 360-degree feedback, it's feedback from all angles. So consider it from feedback from your working circle. That's what we mean by 360 degrees, your working circle. It is there to measure teamwork, your character, your leadership skill, your ability to motivate, influence others. It's actually there to measure the personal sort of stuff. It is not there to measure your performance, how well you're tracking against your KPIs. It is not there to measure the technical skills of your job whatsoever. So they're to be used as a development tool rather than a performance appraisal tool. It's really, really important that you guys are aware of that. Okay, excuse me. Now, when you're providing somebody with feedback, now look, this is a whole other conversation. I always like to talk about things like communication roadblocks when it comes to feedback. Communication's everything when it comes to feedback, and so we've got to be careful not to, I guess, put up some of these roadblocks that I like to talk about. Now, this is a whole session that I'll actually put aside for this one, talking about communication roadblocks, because I think it's a highly important one when it comes to managing people's performance. We do have a subject which basically will dedicate itself to the idea of managing people's performance. I'm going to be leaving things like communication roadblocks, methods of providing feedback, different communication methods and things like that to maximize performance. I'm going to be leaving those for that subject here. Just something, I guess, when providing feedback, just as an overarching thing, it's important to avoid, some of the common communication roadblocks that we can put up all the time. So when you're a coach, actually something I always like to talk about when we're coaching, when we're mentoring. Now, these are other methods of developing other people or providing feedback for other people. When coaching, listen, and listen. Actually, funnily enough, I'm actually not really sure where it fits into the program, but at some point I'm going to be running a webinar on listening because I personally believe that it's actually a subject that deserves its own attention. So on coaching or mentoring, listen. Best advice I can give you is that nobody knows anybody better than they know themselves. I do not know any member of the team that I work with better than they know themselves. So if you understand that straight from the start, then you'll understand all of these, how these communication roadblocks sort of fit in. The key with coaching, the key with mentoring is creating a dialogue. Okay, so to create a dialogue, you really need to be able to listen well, and you need to be able to ask questions. The things that you need to be avoiding are judgmental roadblocks. So criticizing, Name calling, that's a pretty obvious one. I doubt many of you guys would be name calling, although that sort of stuff does happen. You can imagine on a construction site, people get called names. Diagnosing is actually a really bad form of judging. So if you sit there and you try and diagnose somebody's problems or the reason why somebody's performing under par, and yes, no, I can see what's happened here. If you start diagnosing and acting as sort of a psychologist, it's actually a big roadblock because you're effectively judging them at that point. Other things you want to avoid doing are sending solutions. Now, we all, rush to this. I'm very, very, very guilty of doing this a lot. We all are. Sending solutions when you're coaching and mentoring isn't always the best option. So instead of advising and doing all of those solution sending, so here's your answer, here's what you need, here's your problem, basically, you want to try and draw some of the solutions out of the person that you're coaching and you're working with. So that's what we say. Remember, big key with the big key with coaching is that it's all about the dialogue, not the monologue. So remember to always try and engage in a conversation. That's the key. And avoid things like overusing logic or trying to divert the issue. So there's a few things there that you might want to avoid. But we'll get into these in a little bit more detail when we sort of dig into our communication subjects in a little bit more. But okay, so the next question here that you see in this set, if you don't meet a desired job standard, what could you do to improve your skills or knowledge? And the third question there is, using the current job description, what are the job standards required of you? How do you measure yourself against these standards? Okay, so really a job standard, also known as a competency standard. These are just the standards that are required of you to complete your job. So if I open up an example of a job description for a receptionist, you'll see on my screen here is a job description for a receptionist. Gives you a bit of information about the company. This is just an example I've actually just downloaded off Seek. Now you'll see there's your main responsibilities. So one way to get an understanding on what the job standards or the key competencies of the role are to look back at your job description and get an idea of what your main responsibilities are. So for a receptionist, the main responsibilities include things like answering a call, ordering stationery, organising meetings. So the way that this receptionist might be measured, or their KPIs, the way they might be measured for their performance might be, for each of these, there might be a different method. So answering calls, well, that might be looking at a report and that report telling you how many times they answered or didn't answer the call. Did they answer 95% of the inbound calls coming in? Yes? Okay, great. Although ordering stationery might have a completely different methodology of measuring that performance. The way they might measure performance on ordering stationery is, was there a minimum of 5 of this, 7 of that, 10 of those items in the shelf at any given stage? So you might have a minimum, maximum amount of items that you're allowed to keep in and at all times. If we did an audit of the stationery cupboard, are we in between the minimum and the maximums that we need to be? So depending on the actual job, there'll be different ways to measure it. What we need you to do is, firstly, that question there, if you don't meet a desired job standard, what could you do to improve your skill and knowledge? So just think about your own role. Think about the job standards that exist in your own role. Imagine if you needed to improve in one of those, just give me an example of something that you might do to improve a skill or knowledge. That's all. And question 3, what I would like you to do is give me an example of the way that you measure yourself up against some of your key criteria, key responsibilities. So we just had a look at the main responsibilities for a receptionist. I want you to list 2 or 3 of your key responsibilities and talk about ways that you get measured for that. So measurement is a big deal. Would like to sort of have you, just let us know how you actually measure yourself up against those standards. Now, some are going to be quite easy. Some might just be in the form of a report. If I'm a sales guy, to measure myself up against my sales targets, it's probably not too hard because I can just simply print a report. Others may have more challenging ways of measuring themselves, especially when you have things like, customer satisfaction levels and things like that can get a little bit more difficult to measure, although there usually are ways. So please just let us know the way that you effectively measure yourself up against your job standards. Question 4, when was the last time you formally asked for feedback from those around you, and how well did you go? So when was the last time you formally asked for feedback from the people around you, and how did you do? So for this question, I'm curious as to actually what you asked and what the feedback was. So how did you ask? How did you approach, or did they approach you? What was the feedback? And yeah, just tell me the last time that you've asked somebody for feedback. And remember, when you're asking somebody a question, you're essentially getting feedback, and it can be done informally, it could be done formally. Let me just explain the difference between what we know as formal and informal. So a formal method of providing feedback on performance might be something like a one-on-one meeting or a department meeting. It might be actually via a status report. So a regular report that comes out to you is actually a formal method of feedback. It could be even a team meeting. If you might be familiar with having, small team meetings and catch-ups with your work colleagues as a regular sort of thing. They are formal methods. The informal methods are the popping over to an employee's desk or workspace, coffee or lunch with one of your employees, that sort of a thing. Also, an informal method are usually when, as the situation arises. Informal methods are incredibly important, and they're certainly not ones to leave out. If you are only providing feedback to your staff in formal context, you are missing out on a big opportunity, because the informal context situation also looks at it as the situation happens. So there is something really important about immediacy with feedback. So if something happens and you just catch one of your staff members telling a customer, yes, we do whatever we do, and that information was incorrect, you need to go over there at that moment and provide that bit of feedback. The immediacy of the feedback in that situation is incredibly important, because you can catch it as it happens, and it's actually a lot less of a big deal if you catch it in that moment. So if you catch one of your staff saying something that's may not be horrible, but it might just be a little bit incorrect, you go up there and say, hey, I just heard what you said, just letting you know that we've actually changed, or this is the situation, and then it's done. And there's no hard feelings. If, however, you don't mention that at the time, hold that information back, and then try and provide that feedback to one of your staff members in a formal method, so through a one-on-one meeting or through some sort of report. Hopefully not a report, geez, that'd be horrible. But could you imagine how that might feel to somebody receiving that information much, much, much later in a formal setting? It'll feel much more like a personal attack. It'll feel much more like they've done the wrong thing. It is much better to provide that informal, on the spot, immediate feedback as it happens, to minimize obviously the likelihood of it happening again, but also minimizes the intensity that it's felt when receiving that feedback too. So question 4, just when was the last time you asked for feedback from those around you, and how well did you go? Cool. Question 5, of what benefit do you think completing a 360 feedback survey is for you and the business? This is a 2-part question. I want you to tell me what you think the benefits for you are if you were to complete a 360-degree feedback. But I want you to also to tell me what you think the benefits are for the business in conducting a 360-degree feedback as well. So you may need to go back and have a listen to what I mentioned earlier in the video, just in relation to 360-degree feedback. That will certainly be important information for you. Go back, have a listen, and then just for this question, just give me a range, at least 2 or 3 benefits for the individual and 2 or 3 benefits for the business as well. Okay, that's the end of 360 feedback. Let's look at the next section, which if we go back to our homepage here, you'll notice we are now up to the last learning activity, professional growth As mentioned at the start, by the end of this session, you'll have all the information you need to complete all of the learning activities. So now we're up to the very last one. Okay, so professional growth. So I'm going to start with this first question. I'll read out the first question for you. So question 1, upon reflecting on your professional growth over the past 2 years, what problems have you faced? How did you overcome those problems? And provide some examples about what you learnt about yourself and your process at work. So this is actually, I really want you guys to keep this about yourself. Things that we've noticed before that you will actually get passed back for. So don't talk about problems that other people had. Remember, this subject is an introspective subject where we are all developing leaders. We're developing leaders in our field. We understand the purpose and the benefit of self-reflection, self-awareness, and all of those factors in being able to influence and motivate other individuals. This question is about you. Okay, so I want you to have a think about a problem that you might have faced, any problem that you might have faced. How did you overcome that problem? And I want to know what you learned about yourself and your process at work as well. Pick something real. Really like you guys to pick something really real for this question. And I'd like it to be relevant to your professional life. So make sure that if it is part of your personal life, then it also relates to your professional life as well. Have a think about some of your routines, your default routines. What happens when things get stressful? What happens when you don't feel so well? What happens when the pressure's on at work? Try and sort of have a think about some of those little routines that we all do, those little things that we all sort of tend to do at different times. Reflect on those. The real key is, how did you learn what you learned and how you overcome that? So I guess I can talk about what this is the way I would answer this question if this was me, is I would probably talk about how I got into training. So I've been a vocational trainer now for a couple of years, but years ago, and so I've come from various different industries and business. I've worked in advertising. I've worked in music publishing. I've worked in call centers and sales. I've worked in project teams. I've had a wide and varied amount of experience in the world of business. And I was doing a lot of sales coaching and a lot of sales training at the time, and I wanted to get into vocational training. And so I applied for my first job. That was years ago, a couple of years ago now, over a couple of years ago, 2.5 years ago. I applied for my first job and I didn't get it. I applied for my second job and I also didn't get that one either. And then I applied for my third job. And what they actually said to me was, Adam, we actually like you a lot. You're a nice guy. We like you. You've got a lot of experience. You've got a lot of experience in the world of business. That's fantastic. However, you are missing a little bit of experience working with people with mental health. At the time, the role that I was looking to get into in training was working with students that were, I guess, suffering from a range of different mental health issues. So I had the business expertise, I had the sales, the coaching, I had all of the qualifications that I needed. I had everything. The thing that I was missing, or that was I identified that I had a skills or a knowledge gap with working with people that were of a mental health background. So what I actually did, I ended up finding myself a mentor, and that mentor was actually another trainer in the company, and I actually had this cleared and okayed by the organisation. I worked with a mentor for 3 months for no pay. I worked for free for 3 months. It even sounds crazy even hearing me talk about it. I worked for free for 3 months in order to build up the skills and knowledge that I needed to and the experience that I needed to in that particular area. By the end of 3 months, I was effectively offered a full-time role in that position. I'd done such a great job, and the feedback that had come back through from my mentor, and indeed the students, were so positive that they had no choice but to essentially offer me a job. Excuse me. And further than that, the information and knowledge that I gained through that time of working with a mentor was just so profound that it still influences me in an incredibly powerful way today. And it still changes the way that I act and effectively live my life. So it was an incredibly powerful experience for me at the time. What I learned about myself, so if I was to answer this question, what problems I faced? Well, I was trying to get a job in a particular industry. I was unable to. It was discovered that I had a skills knowledge gap. How did I overcome that? Well, I found myself a mentor, and I worked for free and built up the skills and knowledge required to be able to get through that. What I learned about myself at the time was that as soon as I made that connection, that's what I wanted to do. So as soon as I made that connection, you know what? This is what I want to do. I want to become a vocational trainer. This is absolutely 100% what I want to do. As soon as I made that connection, that's what I wanted to do, and was comfortable with that decision. The decision to work for free for 2 or 3 months was actually quite easy. It wasn't a difficult decision at all. It was actually quite liberating, believe it or not. And interestingly enough, the two, I'll call them rejections, but maybe it's probably too heavy a word and it's not really the right word. But the first 2 times that I applied for a job and I didn't get it in this particular field, the first 2 times, I was really concerned that was, potentially going to railroad me a little bit. That was going to throw me out of line. Oh, I didn't do it. I didn't get accepted. That was going to throw me. The funny thing that I also learned about myself is once I'd made the decision and the connection that this is exactly what I want to do, it was actually a lot easier to handle the information coming back to me because it was really important to me. Because it wasn't about being judged, or it wasn't about, like a beauty contest, not a beauty contest, but it wasn't like being picked for the football team, and it wasn't a popularity contest. It was a real world situation. There was some information that I was missing, and I'm absolutely glad that I went through that mentorship program, because 20 times the trainer I am now as a result of going through that 3-month mentorship program. Interesting thing enough, it was a lot easier to handle the bumps on the road heading towards the goal that I was heading towards, which is to become a vocational trainer, once I had made that complete connection that that's what I wanted to do. So that's what I learned about myself too. So remember we talk about SMART goals in the very first webinar, and the letter R in SMART goals. Okay, in the learning materials it talks about it being realistic, but I like to talk about it being relevant. A goal absolutely has to be relevant. It's got to mean something to you. If it doesn't mean something to you, forget about it. Forget about it. And so that's sort of what I learned. Once I had something, a goal, a professional goal, which was super duper duper relevant and really important to me, all of the bumps along the way didn't bother me as much. They were just bumps on the road to where I knew I was going to go. And without a shadow of a doubt, that's where I am right now. So anyway, that's the way I would probably answer that question. That's a bit of a reflection on the way I would do it. Should give you a bit of an idea of what I'm looking for there in an answer. Okay. Second question, provide an example of current or previous performance management, and use this example to highlight how you best measure your own performance and the tools that you use to assist you. So performance management, it's just the system of managing somebody's performance. What we're actually asking you is, when was there a time where you needed to improve a particular skill? So provide an example where you realized, and you may have realized through receiving feedback from somebody else, you may have realized by looking at the sales report at the end of the month, you may have realized by getting a complaint from a customer, you may have realized by your manager coming and having a chat to you saying, look, we need to get you to improve in this particular area. What I want to know is, what was that area that you needed to improve on? So pick an area that you, in the past, where you needed to improve, And then I want you to tell me how you went about actually measuring that performance. Okay, so what was the area that you needed to improve? And then how did you go about measuring that performance? Now, different methods for different people. As I say, if you're a sales guy, the way that you might actually measure your performance is by printing out the sales report at the end of the month. You might have a checklist. So now I know some of the guys that work in hospitality, they might have when they close their shift, they might have a particular checklist to make sure that they've covered all of their areas. So what are the ways that you measure your own performance? Sometimes it might be through feedback from other people. Some are easier than others, but tell me a time where you had to improve a particular area of skill. How did you go about doing it, and how did you measure your performance? The next question is a really interesting one. It's something that I'd ultimately love to have some students in the room to have a conversation about. But what we're talking about here is a competitive edge, a competitive advantage. What sort of things can you do in your professional life to essentially give yourself an advantage over other people? It's a great one to have a conversation with everybody about, as I mentioned. But I'm going to just give you one way. Now, look, this will actually cover these two questions, but I want you guys to actually answer this from your own perspective. So if you want a promotion, what competitive edge would make you stand out from others at work and why? I want you to contextualize this to your own work environment if possible. So tell me what things you might be able to do in your environment and why you would do those things. So always justify. So tell me what you're going to do and why that'll help you to stand out from others. And the next question, list some of the strategies that you could use to remain competitive. So what are some of the strategies you can use to remain competitive? This one is going to be purely relating to your own situation. So please, if you're not working at the moment for whatever reason, then please consider this from the perspective of your professional activities. So instead of looking for a promotion, potentially if you're trying to get that job over somebody else, what sort of things might you do to help stand out from others? What sort of strategies would you do to keep yourself current and valid and whilst you're in the job market? Okay. Something I always like to say, actually, it's something I usually talk to job seekers about. I used to work with job seekers, and I used to help people that were long-term unemployed try and connect to work situations. If you want a promotion, if you identify yourself as that person, you need to let people know. In life, it's the way I like to say it, in life, if you never ask, you will never receive. This works in life, this works in work, in your professional life, in your personal life as well. And as we progress through the course, I do talk about methods of communication that I guess are the right ways and the wrong ways about going about different things, and we talk about different ways to do that. But just in general, in life, if you never ask, you will never receive. Okay? So I'm not even actually giving you a strategy. Well, this is kind of a strategy, but I'm not really giving you an idea for a competitive edge here, but just as a broad sort of holistic statement, in life, if you never ask, you'll never receive. So there's actually two ways you could potentially go about doing this. You could potentially march into your boss's office. You could send him an email, or you could just march in, open the door, rah, 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 rah. Hello, I want a promotion. I do all this work, blah, 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 blah. I'm very, very good. Look at what I've done for you before. Why don't you give me a promotion? I want it. I want more money as well. Okay, thank you. Yeah, look, that's one way of doing it. That may work for you. It also may put you in a very awkward position as well. So if you've ever thought about running into the boss's office and telling him or telling her how hard you've been working and how much you deserve a promotion and how much you should be getting more money and all of those sort of things, it's very awkward. And especially if it's not able to, and I've seen this plenty of times, if it's not able to happen, it'll put you in a really uncomfortable position. It is actually not my suggestion for the way of going about it. My suggestion is to take a more modest yet very assertive approach. So instead of going in there saying, I want a promotion, rah, 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 look at all this work I've done, the attitude that you should be taking in this is talk about your passion and desires to work in the area that you want to work. So if you want a promotion, talk about why it connects with you. So sit down, have a proper chat with somebody, tell them why it's important to you. And the best way to do this is to take a it is what I call a modest yet assertive approach, but it's also a collaborative approach. The way you should attack this is to say, look, I would love to work with you to develop an action plan or development plan so that I can build the necessary skills and knowledge to be in a position to be considered for that role in the future. So you see how those two are complete opposites. The first one where I said you can march into the boss's office, go rah, 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 I want a promotion, look at everything I've done, I want more money. Or you can walk in there, talk about why you would like that role, what it means to you, the connection you have to it, and talk about developing an action or development plan so that you can build the necessary skills and knowledge to be in a position to be considered for that role in the future. It is incredibly powerful. It shows that you are prepared to put in the work necessary to do the job. It shows a connection between you and the role itself and why it's important to you. It shows that you have a fantastic attitude. And it also shows that you're willing to work hard for something that's important for you. Okay, so that's my big advice, I guess. Now, it's something that I also talk about for job seekers. So when you're going in for a job interview, this works just the same when you get asked the question, where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? In most job interviews, you'll get asked that question, where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? Don't say on an island holiday. Don't say I'll be hopefully in your job, because that's actually quite arrogant. It actually doesn't work. The best way to answer this is exactly the same way as the way that you should approach trying to coordinate your own promotion and development. So to do so, you want to take that collaborative approach. And the way you would answer that question in a job interview is, look, I see myself over the next few years working very, very hard, developing and building the necessary skills that I need to execute my role to the fullest potential. At that point, in a few years' time, I would love to sit down and work with my superior, if that's yourself, whoever that might be, to sit down and work on an action and development plan so that I can then start to build the foundation for the necessary skills, knowledge that I need so that in 5 years' time, I am in a position to be considered for that role in the future. Because this question, actually in a job interview situation, this question of 5 years is really trying to determine how much ambition you've got, but it's also trying to see what your sort of work ethic, what your attitudes to hard work are as well. So you want to come across ambitious, but you want to come across as somebody who's got a good attitude, who's willing to do the work, willing to put in the necessary time. Cool. And it's okay to talk about why it's important to you. So remember, if you're going for a job, if you can't answer the question, why is this important to you? Why is this relevant to you? Money aside, now money can be a big motivator, that's fine, but money aside, it's really important that you connect with it. And I think it also helps too when you're having that conversation and you're working with somebody and you're taking that sort of collaborative approach to your own development, that you're able to express why something's quite important to you. I think it just helps to paint a picture. And at the end of the day, we're all human beings, so it's okay to connect on a human level to it. Okay, last couple of things we're going to talk about tonight. Actually, we'll cover the last 3 questions here. So what we're looking at here is networking. So what is networking? Well, there's a good definition actually straight out of the learning materials. Networks are made up of groups who exchange information and ideas based on common interests. Networks will help you build contacts while developing your interpersonal skills. The contacts you'll make will provide you with the opportunity to do a lot of things. Have a look at the learning materials to catch all of those sorts of things. I guess when it comes to networking is important in business, and it can assist you in gaining a competitive advantage. Something I wanted to let you know about is, LinkedIn. You may or may not be aware, but LinkedIn is actually an incredibly large social networking site. It's social media, but it's professional social media. So I guess best way to explain it, it's Facebook for professionals, just with a lot less cat pictures on it, basically. So it's Facebook, just minus all the cats. That was kind of a joke. Not exactly, but nevertheless, just so you've got an understanding, 30% of the population in America are users of LinkedIn. Almost 95 million Americans are connected on LinkedIn, professionals. In Australia, if you think it doesn't have much penetration in Australia, 6 million users use LinkedIn in Australia. It's a quarter of the population, 1/4 of the population. Now, possibly only half of the population are working at the moment, so half of the working population are using this site. It will grow. Organizations are using it to assist them with their recruitment strategy now. It's actually become a big part of organizational recruitment strategy. LinkedIn is your ground zero for professional networking. It's your ground zero for all of that sort of stuff. If you're not on LinkedIn, I would definitely suggest to get onto LinkedIn and have a bit of a look around. When we talk about networking, there are many ways to network. Actually, I always like to talk about the power of personal networks. We all know so many people. People want to hire other people that they trust. As an organization, organizations love getting referrals from staff. They absolutely love it. Why? Because they know that their staff members wouldn't recommend anybody that they don't trust. And the figures suggest that the retention rates are better as well. If people are recommended to a role, they are more likely to stay there longer term. It's a lot cheaper as well because it saves a whole lot of money, and organizations like to offer incentives for people. So if you know somebody who's looking for a job that you would recommend, if they are good and they last 6 months, we'll give you a bonus of $1,000 just for recommending that person. Saved us $2,000 on, saved us a couple of grand. Here's $1,000 in your hand. We'd rather give you the money. Fantastic. Interestingly enough, I think it's an important thing for people to note. A lot of us, and I'm also guilty of this in the past, but a lot of us find it hard to ask for help from other people. A lot of the time we find it hard as human beings to ask for help from others. But consider this, when somebody asks you for help, somebody asks you for a favor, or somebody says, look, you're the expert here, I'm just wondering if you can help me out with something. How does that feel? Feels really good. Feels really good. So sometimes when we're looking for work, we're looking to improve something, we're looking for a promotion, we're looking just to see what else is out there, it's okay to engage in our personal networks, but it's okay to ask, especially if you're looking for work, it's okay to ask for help, because essentially we don't want to be denying somebody else that bit of joy that they may receive through that process. So just remember, when we're asking for a little bit of help from somebody, we're effectively complimenting somebody through that process. So if that makes it a little bit easier for you to get through that, then that's great. My brother-in-law actually referred me to a role many, many, many moons ago, and I knew that he knew somebody that could help me, and I had a pretty sour relationship with him at the time, but I actually knew this idea that despite that I didn't want to really ask him for help because I didn't get along well with him, he was actually going to get such great joy in being able to provide a little bit of help to me that I felt there's no way known that I can, not do that or prevent him from experiencing that. So I did ask him for help, and believe it or not, we actually have a fantastic relationship now, and it all stemmed from that. It all stemmed from that. We both felt very good about the relationship after that moment of time. He did actually help me find some work at the time, many moons ago. But he also felt that he was a little bit more connected to me because we had a connection at that point. So it was actually a really interesting dynamic in our relationship. And so just, putting it out there. Ways to network. Join clubs. Join an organization. A friend of mine, a trainer, she is part of a fitness group. These guys, they meet a couple of times a week and they do, yoga and exercise and, I don't know, push-ups and what have you. It's like a corporate group that meet up to do exercise in the morning before work a couple of times a week. She was talking with one of the guys there, and she knew that he worked in, I think he was an IT professional, not really realizing that he actually could and was of great help to her. She was a trainer, but she was just out of work at that moment of time. And she started talking to this particular gentleman who was an IT professional. Turns out that this gentleman's, one of his closest friends, was a CEO of a huge training company, organized a meetup for her, and she got a job as a result of that. So you never know, you never know where those networks, where those people are, who knows what. My suggestion is always be polite, always be honest, never be afraid to show your true self, never be afraid to be a little bit vulnerable, be respectful of other people, and do not burn bridges. Don't burn bridges, just don't do it. Other ways to network, you can have business cards made up. You can actually speak to people. Believe it or not, just talk to people. Talking to people is a form of networking. It's one of the most important forms of networking. If my friend, if she never had a conversation with this IT professional, not thinking for the life of her that this gentleman was about to help her get a job, if she never had a conversation with him, it never would have made it that far. So use your own workplace. Network in your own workplace. Use formal associations as well to network. If you ever go to trade shows or trade fairs, take the opportunity to get to know people. Classes. You guys, you're all here online in this class. Unfortunately, not many of you in the webinar tonight, but it's a good opportunity through our forums, through our webinars, get to know some of your other cohort, get to know some of the other other students that are in the mix here. Just remember, some of the most important people in the world and in life are some of the most approachable and modest people in this world. Some of the most influential and important people in life are also some of the most nice, genuine, approachable and modest people on the planet too. So so what we've just talked about is networking there. So what are some of the networking ways that have worked for you in the past? Tell me how you've managed to network in the past. Tell me some of the benefits that you've got from networking. Now, if you have a look at the materials, we talk about, forging alliances with people. Those people can provide you with industry information. Those people can provide you with opportunities. You can generate information. Building these networks can assist during negotiations. You might be able to get a special price. You might be able to, as a result of that network or that connection. There are many benefits. Have a look through yourself, through the materials, and list off a range of different benefits, please. Question 7 is a double of question 3. If you want to answer it again, you'll get double points. Actually, let's just get rid of it. This is happening in real time now. Okay, guys, so that really ends our resource webinar 3, which is the final resource webinar. Guys, don't forget to tune in next week. I'll be taking through the very final webinar for professional development, which will be the assessment support workshop webinar. So please keep an eyeball out for that one. And don't forget, I'll be uploading this edition or this tonight's session. I'll be uploading that to the course page right here at the conclusion of this session. So have a look out in the next 24 hours for the recorded version of this. Thanks very much for those that are tuning in on a delayed telecast to tune in on this one. Thanks to those that are producing work at the moment. If you need any help with anything, obviously please just get in touch. You can call me directly 03 9956 9965 or reply to any of my emails, or you can send me a message through Message My Trainer function on the website as well. Thank you very, very much for tuning in, and I look very much forward to seeing you on the next edition. Thanks, guys.